Okay, we're up to about 20. I'll give people just a couple more minutes and then we'll just start the meeting. Okay, we've still got a few people joining. I'm just going to give them 15, 20 seconds more and then we will start. Okay, I think we're at about 30 people. I think that's a good number. I think sure people will join as we straggle. Stragglers will join as we start. So good evening. I'm David Charlesworth. I'm a communication manager and the Cambridge Youth Access project is one of the projects I looked after. This is a webinar just to cover some of the projects in the East that are of a strategic nature. So we've got a presentation on the Cambridge Youth Access project and then a short update on the Greenways. So we're going to run through the presentations first. Firstly, there'll be Joe Baker, who's the project manager for Eastern, and then Grant Weller from our cycling team will be talking about the Greenways, particularly the Greenways that are in the east of Cambridge. We're also joined by colleagues from Cambridge City Council who will be able to give you a short update on the Barmore project, and then we'll move to questions. I'm also joined by a number of other colleagues from the GCP who are to help make the meeting run smoothly. Just to say normal rules of behaviour apply. Everyone's reminded that any inappropriate conduct or disruptive behaviour may result in you being excluded from the event. We have our Alistair, who's our able technical lead, who's on hand to make sure that the whole thing runs smoothly. But you know, everyone is joining from their homes. There may be a little bit of background noise, but I'm sure we can have a good meeting. There are two ways that we would like you to participate in the meeting when we come to questions. You either can put your hand up and a little blue hand will appear, and I'll take the questions in the order that they come, and we're very keen for you to talk and participate that way. However, if you are feeling a little bit more shy and just want to put something in the chat function, I'll read through the chat questions and direct them to the appropriate officer when we get to them. I will try and group some of the chat questions if there are topics that are coming available, simply so that we have a conversation that I think we can all understand. Once this meeting's finished, the presentation and the recording of this event will be available on our website. So if you want to look back at anything that we've talked about tonight, you can, and that's accessible to everybody. So I think that's all of the introductions. I think, do we have a question already? Sorry, Peter, you've put your hand, Peter Pope has put his hand up. Can we just, is it a question about the scope of the meeting? If you can let him speak, I'm happy to take a question in the beginning. Alistair, is it possible to unmute Peter, please?
I've given Peter permission to speak.
Okay, Peter, you need to unmute your end and then you can ask your question. Okay, we can't hear you, so we will, if you can put your question in the chat, or if you can work out how to unmute yourself your end, we're happy to take your question, but I can't actually hear you. So, okay, anyway, let's move on to the presentations since we can't hear the question. Joe, are you happy to, I'm happy to hand over to you, and Sarah, if you want to start with the presentations, we'll start running through those.
Thanks everybody. Hopefully Sarah will share a screen with the slides on. Thank you. So yeah, this is, as I said, the Cambridge East place-based meeting. It's a way we're trying to work in the future, so drawing together the different activities in the Eastern Corridor, and hopefully we'll do that in an increasingly joined up way. In terms of the agenda, I think David's run through that already, so if we can move on, please. And Cambridge Eastern Access. So the first couple of slides, most of you will have seen already, so I'll run through relatively quickly, but just as a quick recap, if anyone wasn't around previously. Sorry, someone's got a little bit of echo on, if they could mute, please. The aims and objectives of the project are to identify a range of options to improve reliability, safety, capacity, speed of sustainable transport, such as public transport, walking and cycling, to improve access to Cambridge from the east, but also improve connections between existing settlements and identify measures to ensure connections are in place when new developments open to reduce the need for trips by private car. So relatively straightforward overall objectives aligned with the wider policies for transport across Cambridgeshire and the city. For the next slide, please. Why do we need to act? Again, this will be little surprise to most people. The key routes into the city from the east suffer lots of congestion. Even now in COVID era, it is getting worse again in Cambridge, not least when there are huge tomato spills, but even anyway, it is certainly getting worse again. But we'll remember what it was like a couple of years ago. With local plan growth, it's likely congestion will get worse unless alternatives are put in place. There is already considerable development in the area. People will be particularly aware of the ongoing work at Marley and what is committed at land north of Cherry Hinton. There are a number of other sites that are in the process of being developed, and we are well aware that there is the proposal by Marshals to redevelop the airport site, which may be included in the next round of the Greater Cambridge Local Plan. That will become clearer over the coming months. And this is therefore one of the 4 areas identified by Greater Cambridge Partnerships Executive Board for a longer term high quality public transport solution. The next slide, please. So again, the location, most of you will be very familiar of. We've talked about this before. Broadly speaking, looking at the area out from Elizabeth Way towards the Quay Interchange, bounded north by the A14, and really going south about as far as the Cambridge Newmarket railway line, but not looking at it in a rigid way, but that broadly speaking is the area which we've been looking at for the study. The next slide, please. So where have we got to so far? We had initial stakeholder workshops on the 1st of 2nd of July last year. Some of you will have been involved with those. We then ran an initial public engagement from the 6th of July to the 3rd of August. And as with everything pretty much for this study, it was online due to COVID-19. The Executive Board reviewed that initial work and gave approval for consultation when it met on the 1st of October 2020. We then ran a more detailed public consultation from the 26th of October to the 18th of December, and we have now drawn together reports for the joint assembly of the Greater Cambridge Partnership on the 10th of June. And those will include a detailed consultation report and the strategic outline business case for the scheme. Those documents are already published online, so you're welcome to review those if you've not seen them already. And they're sort of put in the papers for that meeting. The consultation, as I said, ran from October to December last year. We sought views on 5 options, which included a range of public transport and active travel measures, really phased into 2 phases around shorter and longer term measures. And just as a reminder, the shorter term measures focused on mainly the Newmarket Road. The longer term measures were very much around what would happen if the Marshall site is allocated for development. So looking at a public transport route through that site as an alternative to the Newmarket Road. Clearly, if the Marshall site is not available for development, then that sort of option doesn't necessarily work. And a decision on how we proceed in the future will be taken by the Greater Cambridge Partnership Executive Board on the 1st of July 2021. So they'll review the documentation, they'll review the advice from the Joint Assembly, and also feedback from any sort of responses to the discussions that we have today as well. And that will inform their decision on the 1st of July. Next slide, please. So just as a very quick resume of the outcome, a positive to start with, that the majority of respondents, almost 80%, supported the general proposal to improve public transport and associated active travel routes into Cambridge from the east of the city. So a strong general level of support for the principle that action is needed on that. And if we go to the next slide, looking across the 5 options we looked at, in all of those cases, whilst there was more support, particularly for rail improvement and the Newmarket Road improvements, we had a majority of those expressing an opinion on each option. And as we always say with these things, these are not alike elections or referenda. They're to really sort of give us an idea where public opinion is going. But for all options, we had more people in favour than against. So that doesn't mean that we necessarily plump for the most popular option, but it gives the Executive Board a very good steer as to what public opinion was on the different schemes. If we move to the next slide, please. So the sort of conclusions that were coming out of the exercise, and these will be debated by the Assembly and go on to the Executive Board. Overall, as I say, strong support for the general need for intervention, and there is a strong supporting strategic case for intervention. So the document that we have currently produced is a strategic outline business case. That's not a detailed case. It doesn't yet have full environmental impact assessment, detailed economic impact assessment. It focuses particularly on, at a strategic level, whether there is a need and an argument for doing something. And the case for doing something is strong in that regard. Significantly more work would be needed downstream in due course before you'd actually get to a point of taking action. A recommendation that Phase A improvements to Newmarket Road should be taken forward. They're clearly complementary to other GCP projects. There are clearly existing problems along the Newmarket Road. And as you'll hear from colleagues from the city, there's also a desire to improve urban realm around places like East Barnwell, as well as more generally along Newmarket Road. So there's a strong argument to get on and do something there. If we go to the next slide, we would also recommend in the longer term, looking at a Phase B public transport route via Coldham's Lane to a relocated park and ride site. That's a slightly longer piece of work. Both the relocation of the park and ride and the improvement to the public transport route would take longer and would need more detailed appraisal, including things like environmental impact assessments. We did, some people will be aware, look at 2 alternative routes into the city centre. One along Coldham's Lane, the other along across the Thames and along Mill Road via Brookfields. I would say that from the initial consultation, there was quite a lot of interest from the Coldham's Lane area that actually reducing the amount of car traffic and improving public transport was seen as attractive. Some very valid concerns were raised by residents in the Brookfields area about the reality of getting buses through there and how you would deal with, for example, existing parking and properties. So that's why we've sort of moved in favour of that option. Possibly this would involve improvements to the Coldham's Lane roundabout. Again, people will be aware that's something that's been looked at by the Combined Authority. It hasn't been moving forward in the last few months, but clearly if the Coldham's Lane or Sainsbury's roundabout is not improved, that becomes a really big barrier to improving this corridor. And we may need to look at the overbridge on the railway as well. Clearly, as I said, this option really depends on whether or not the Marshall site is allocated for redevelopment in the draft local plan. Whichever way we go, there's a need to consider the reallocation of road space, both on Newmarket Road and Coldham's Lane. Newmarket Road, as we know, it's got a very poor urban realm in place, and it does feel quite car dominated in places. Coldham's Lane, which had strong representation made by residents about the impact of, as it was indeed yesterday's, continuous queuing traffic as being highly undesirable as a place to live. So in both places, trying to make it these better places for public transport and especially walking and cycling. The potential to improve the Cambridge to Newmarket railway line is much more of a longer term thing. And I think our aspiration is that we'd work with East West Rail, work with Network Rail to do that. It's something that will take probably longer than the GCP sort of lifeline, and also a significant budget to sort out. Clearly, the railway line is a great asset for this corridor. There is already work that's being done by the East West Rail Consortium to look at the opportunities, and we would be keen to continue to engage with and collaborate with that work. So I've moved to the next slide. So just a couple of plans. I won't go through these in detail now, but we can go back to them in questions if people need to. The Phase A improvements shown including the relocated park and ride. Effectively, the decision is that the timing on the park and ride is a little different from the Newmarket Road work. I think our intention is to get on and start looking at traffic management on Newmarket Road relatively quickly, whereas the park and ride will take a little longer to resolve. But there is an aspiration to move forward on that, possibly in advance of the public transport scheme. And just to be clear, we've hatched out a general area where that might be. The aim is to look at a site east of Airport Way, south of Newmarket Road, but by no means using all of the land that's currently hatched out. I think what we've shown is broadly the land that's above the 10-metre line, so not into the wetter area of the fen. And clearly a number of complementary opportunities for walking and cycling measures within this, for example, linking to the Chisholm Trail, as well as others that may come through. If we look at the Phase B improvements, that would be a route going effectively from Airport Way and the park and ride site down through the Marshall site. One thing that I think I probably need to explain at this point is we'll be aware of the changes in control at the Combined Authority and the change of mayor. So we had previously shown a potential tunnelled option that would take you onto the railway station and further on. Technically speaking, that remains the written Combined Authority policy. I think we'll all be aware from the media that it is likely, or it would appear likely, that that will change, and we will clearly need to rethink things on the basis that there will not be a longer term strategy to do that. In terms of where we would then be looking, the presumption is we would have a route that would go along Coldham's Lane, with an option either to go along Coldham's Lane or down and then along in Mill Road to get to the station, with walking and cycling improvements along the Tins, but not taking the public transport along the Tins. I saw there's a question pop up, and I'll try and come back to that in a minute when I get to the end of the presentation. We guys go to the next slide. So this is just talking at the long-term rail opportunity, again showing the indicative alignment of the CAM as it was, recognising it's much less likely that that would proceed. What we looked at were the potential to consider new rail station locations. They could be at a number of locations. One would be what I'd call a Cambridge East interchange, which would be the interchange of the Newmarket line and the CAM as was, or the new high quality public transport route as it appears more likely. But also, and this has come out of the consultation, a strong suggestion that a location in Fulbourn might well be a suitable location, whilst there has been discussion of 6 Mile Bottom, where there might be perhaps scope for a park and ride, possibly in connection with alternative proposals for development, again, that have been proposed as options for the local plan, not something that is currently adopted. And again, really just to reiterate, this would work more effectively with either the double tracking of the Cambridge Newmarket line or certainly some improvements to it. It's worth noting that that line is still constrained, particularly on the approach into Cambridge. It's also constrained at Newmarket, whereas people will be aware it's likely to remain single track. So there are limited opportunities, but there is work afoot to at least look at what the choices might be in the future along the line. So just go to the next slide. So just a few other issues that we really need to resolve as things move forward. As I say, this study remains at a relatively early phase. It's going to the Executive Board for a decision on how it moves forward. Clearly, the emerging Greater Cambridge local plan is absolutely critical. Understanding whether or not the Marshall site is included in it, or indeed the 6 Mile Bottom site. We need to look at the timing of the park and ride scheme and whether that sort of fits more comfortably as something that can be done in advance of the wider public transport scheme or not. There's a definite need to refine the proposals for Newmarket Road. We've done some initial modelling of those, and there are challenges in terms of the level of congestion that you might get if you reallocate road space to improve the situation for public transport and walking and cycling. Whilst we are looking to improve public transport, walking and cycling, we're not looking to cause complete logjam. So there's definitely more work that we need to do to refine that. We need to understand the plans that the East West Rail Consortium is likely to come up with for the Cambridge Newmarket Railway line. They've been undertaking a study and we're awaiting the outcome of that. And of course, we'll need to see what comes out from the combined authority in terms of their plans for alternatives to CAM. We understand from the combined authority meeting earlier this week that they're going to be producing a report in about 4 to 6 weeks, which will start indicating where their thinking may go. And obviously we will continue to seek to work collaboratively with them once we're clear what direction they're looking to take in the future. So we go to the next slide. Just worth flagging up, clearly there are a lot of links from this scheme to other projects. As always, anywhere, we need to think about those interactions. In Cambridge, if anything, it's more rather than less complicated than it often is elsewhere. The links to the greenways is important in terms of improving walking and cycling, and Grant will talk you through what we're looking at in this part of the city. The City Access project is looking at how we would reallocate road space and encourage more sustainable modes in the city centre, and particularly on the assumption that the CAM does not proceed as planned, we would be needing to look very carefully at how vehicles would proceed through the city centre. Chisholm Trail, people will be well aware of as what has been a challenging process in times, but in due course will hopefully create a great asset for walking and cycling in the north-south direction. We need to ensure that we interface with it and provide good interchange with it. East-West Rail and the CAM, I think I've touched on already, but remain important interfaces. And finally, bus franchising. And it's clear that whilst the Mayor has indicated a move away from the proposals for the autonomous metro, he's very keen on the principles of bus franchising, which would give him greater powers over the specification of bus services. In earlier stages of the consultation, stakeholders have raised a lot of concerns about the lack of services out to the villages, both to the east of Cambridge, but also to the north of the A14. And bus franchising creates an opportunity for more specification of what services might be needed in the future. So, you know, these are all important opportunities. So if you just want to go on to the next slide. This plan was the one we've shown previously, which just looks at what we called the Greater Cambridge Future Network and how all the different schemes move together. We are looking to update that once we've got some clarity about where CPCA is looking to be going in the future. So that was intended to show the interface between all these projects, but clearly we anticipate an upgrade to that. I think it seems less likely that there will be the CAM tunnel sections in particular. And obviously East-West Rail, we now know a little more about what they're proposing, and we'll, once we have an idea where their consultation's gone, we'd be revisiting that as well. Thanks, that's pretty much me done. If you go on, Sarah. So the next steps will be the joint assembly we've mentioned. Hopefully we can answer your questions today, but you are at liberty to pose questions to the assembly. The deadline is there, and the details of the process by which to do it are available on our website. Similarly, the Executive Board on the 1st of July, and again, there's an opportunity for public questions if questions are lodged by the deadline. And again, that process is defined clearly on our website, and we can talk you through that if anyone's got any concerns about that. Thanks, Sarah. If you can move. So Grant, we'll just take through the cycling schemes. David, do we want to take any clarification questions, or should we keep them with?
There is just this question from Nikki Shepherd, which was just asking that if the Phase A improvements in Market Road, will that include the Barmore Road roundabout safety for both cyclists and traffic flow? Because the McDonald's roundabout is seen as very dangerous for cyclists and
absolutely, very much so. I mean, that the concerns about both Elizabeth Way and Barnwell Road roundabouts have been made very, very, very strongly throughout, and so absolutely those are seen as priorities. I mean, I think there's a strong consensus that we need to really visit those early, and that's a reason also for trying to advance on phase A quickly, because there are strong concerns. And I think when we come to touch on the East Barnwell work as well, that will also pick up the concern that what's there at the moment is a significant barrier to movement across that area other than people in cars. So yeah, very much so.
Okay, thanks Joe, that was very comprehensive. As I say, we're going to move on, and Grant's going to start talking about the greenways, and then we'll open it up to and then we'll have someone from the City Council just update us on the East Barnwell project, and then we'll full of questions. But if you've got questions, please put your hand up in with the red hand, with the blue hand, or start to type your questions in the chat, and we'll come to them at the end. Okay, Grant, over to you, please. You're on mute at the moment, don't forget.
Right, thanks, David. Hi all. Well, I'm Grant Weller, the interim team leader for cycling in Cambridgeshire County Council. I work across both County Council and GCP, and especially in representing the greenways. So next slide, please, Sarah. So there's 12 greenways, and they're going to provide fantastic links for cyclists, walklists and horse riders into and around Cambridge, with links to railway stations, planned travel hubs, science and business parks, employment areas, schools, colleges, leisure facilities, and also to the Chisholm Trail, which you'll see is indicated on the orange line on the indicative map that's just to the right of the screen there. The final board approval for all the greenways was granted in December 2020, and 2 consultants were appointed on the 1st of June to undertake all the design work for a brand new professional services framework. And those 2 consultants were Atkins and WSP. We've taken the decision to split all the greenways between these 2 consultants geographically. So as you can see, the north and south routes lie with Atkins, which is St Ives, Waterbeach, Sawston and Melbourne. And the east and west routes lie with WSP, which are Fulbourn, Horningsea, Swaffhams, Bottisham, Haslingfield, Barton and Comberton. That represents 11 greenways. The 12th one, which is the Linton Greenway, is forming part of the CSETS project. So next slide, please. So the construction of the greenways will be non-linear, i.e. this is that we're not going to start at the first point and go through construction to the end point. Each greenway is a set of individual interventions with different time frames. So it's incredibly difficult to start at the first and finish at the end. This programme will be undertaken by the consultants to ensure that we get an effective delivery across the greenways programme. 2 consultants, WSP and Atkins, will be carrying out all the detailed design work. They'll be doing the full costings and programme of delivery, and then we'll be appointing separate contractors to carry out the appointed construction. So from between the greenways getting approval in December and the consultants being appointed in June, we've been trying to deliver a number of quick wins or early deliverables. And as you'll see from the photographs, that includes a resurfacing of the riverside in Cambridge and some footpath renewal works on Stourbridge Common. And the top photograph is the works we've undertaken on the footpath from the M11 overbridge back into Coton. Across the greenways, generally the routes have been consulted on and approved, but we're aware that across the board that there will be more community engagement that's going to be planned to involve local people in the design and the route of their individual greenways. The overall programme is scheduled for 2025. It's quite a large undertaking of work, so we're looking at sort of construction work and design work over the next 4 years.
Okay, thanks very much, Grant. We'll come back to questions, Grant, at the end. We now move on to, I think there's a slide from Rory on the Barnwell thing.
Yep.
So,
Yep, thank you, David.
thanks, Rory.
Hello.
If you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, indeed, of course. So my name is Rory Lowings. I work for the City Council, and I have been working on the East Barnwell Development and Regeneration Plan for just over a year. Just to give you a bit of background, the City Council has been looking at a number of options for how the various different challenges faced by East Barnwell might be addressed by regeneration, essentially, in the area and investment. Some of the challenges which we've encountered are matters that have already been discussed today, but we have conducted two consultations with the local community, the East Barnwell Conversations, Part 1 and 2, which some people on this call may have participated in. And as a result, we have come up with a number of key challenges, a number of key objectives that we would like to see as part of future development in East Barnwell. And when I sort of say the master plan is close to completion, what I really mean is we now have findings that we would like to publish later in the summer for the community. And the master plan is very much a guidance document. It's not necessarily a commitment to develop specific sites, but it does identify opportunities across the area that we think we ought to look at in more detail, and we will certainly be engaging the communities in more detail on specific sites. So in terms of our findings, I'll just go through them quickly. From the two East Barnwell Conversations, the top priority for people is really tying the neighbourhood together as much as anything else. And one of the proposals we had is for a new local centre, or rather a regenerated local centre, right in the middle of the East Barnwell area. One of the big things in urban development at the moment is the concept of a 15-minute neighbourhood, say location where people can, within 15 minutes, get to a certain number of basic community facilities. And East Barnwell, in many respects, is the perfect shape for it. One of the big challenges that people in the area will be aware of, and that obviously the speakers from before are also very aware of, is that the biggest obstacle to achieving that 15-minute neighbourhood is the two major roads, Newmarket Road and Barnwell Road, which kind of cut up the community as it currently is. And one of the things that the proposals to obviously alter traffic and improve the general transportation links across the whole of East Cambridge, we're hoping we'll do, is support our aim to sort of tie it together a bit better. That regenerated local centre is part of that plan as well. The aim is to provide new facilities, both for existing businesses and potentially for new businesses in the area, and to provide a kind of community focus point that people can meet indoors or outdoors, especially outdoors these days, something that came through a lot in last year's consultation, as you might imagine, and to fundamentally provide a place that people feel able to go to rather than necessarily the city centre, and that can be reached by foot and by bike, most importantly. And we think that's achievable. But there are a number of things that we need to achieve to get there. We have been working with Joe's team to see if what we've proposed so far, the projects we've been looking at to achieve that new local centre, are going to fit with the potential changes to Newmarket Road and the general access to East Cambridge, and we think they do, is the short version. So when that master plan comes through, there'll be a little more detail on that, but so far it all looks like it's going to fit. Second objective is obviously connections and transport, which was already discussed at great length today. The City Council is to some extent the junior partner in a lot of these discussions of how we're going to help deliver the various new cycle links and the various new pedestrian links across the City of Cambridge. But again, I've been in touch with Grant's team. We know what their plans are. They fit with everything that we have discussed with other stakeholders and that we're potentially looking at with our own developments in future. And we believe that, we have some very key principles which we've applied to anything we've looked at, which is it going to increase permeability across the area? We think, again, it is. We'll be aiming to sort of create new through routes, essentially, through the ward, that people aren't necessarily pushed to the same routes every time, and that we can support, as I say, the development of the greenways going forward. Open space enhancements are the third objective. And really what that's about is making the quite substantial open space which people live very close to in Abbey Ward and in East Barnwell, both more accessible and to some extent more of a destination. That was a very popular theme over the two phases of the East Barnwell conversation. And again, I think it fits very cleanly with tying the area together more in terms of foot and cycle access. But it will potentially mean investment in the Abbey Leisure Centre. It will mean helping to deliver schemes such as the cycle cafe along the Chisholm Trail, obviously helping to achieve the Chisholm Trail and as much as we can help to facilitate that. And really just ensuring that the facilities that are available to people are up to date and in good condition, and that they serve the community that they're intended to serve effectively. There's a question on Fen Ditton, but I will get to that. I think just at the end of that, that's all right. And finally, so the opportunity areas objective is really just a discussion that there are many opportunities in East Barnwell for regeneration of various kinds. It's not necessarily the case that one local centre will serve to tie the entire community together. We don't think it will. We think that there are potentially a number of candidates, sites where change would potentially bring new community facilities, new opportunities for placemaking, really across the area. That would potentially involve new housing. There was interest in a range of housing offers which might become available in the event that we did regeneration in the ward for housing. So that is something that we're very much looking at. What we haven't committed to do at this stage is to redevelop any individual sites. There is a whole tranche of local community engagement which we would have to do before we could press on with any regeneration plans. But we have very much in our minds that Abbey Ward and East Barnwell especially does need a bit of TLC and could use a bit of investment, and we are going to explore a number of sites where that investment could enhance the local community. I hope that sort of summarises where we are. As I say, we're looking to publish a master plan towards the end of September. There's a little bit further to go before we've completed it, but that's where we are in terms of our major objectives. That's what we'd like to see come forward, and we think that very much fits with the objectives of the other officers we've seen today.
Okay, thank you very much, Rory. I'm going to move to questions. Councillor Daunton, you wanted to ask some questions and you've got your hand up, so if we can unmute Councillor Daunton, that'd be good. I've got a question here from John Trapp while we're just unmuting Claire. John, okay. You haven't written your question in full, it finishes, so if you'd like to resubmit it, it just ends without, it's not clear what you're asking. Claire, I understand you have 3 questions.
Yes, thank you. This project is called the Eastern Access Project, and so I assume that it's about accessing the city from the east. And I'm speaking as a ward member for a ward to the east of the city. So I wonder why there's been no talk about Newmarket Road, improving Newmarket Road back from the Quay roundabout. Why the improvements to Newmarket Road don't include in the first phase the moving of the park and ride, because I understand that's in the second phase. Connected with that, the greenways, I noticed on the map, they go as far northeast as Swaffham and the Swaffhams, but they don't go east beyond Fulbourn. And many of you on this call will know that I will not stop talking about the people in the east who have no public transport, no bus, no rail, and no cycle paths. So what's happening about our cycle connection to the greenways? I will keep on asking about that because we are the forgotten east. And then finally, on Newmarket Road, it's great to think of better walking and cycling, but I know from some of my residents that there are people, tradesmen or professional people like architects who have to drive into the city, not because they want to drive into the city, because then during the course of the day, they might have to go all around seeing clients. And they are concerned about becoming pariahs because they have to drive into the city. And will it be very, very difficult for them to drive into the city? Will what's going to happen to Newmarket Road make it sort of punitive for car users or van users? So I think that's probably 4 questions in one.
Oh, it's 4 questions, correct. Okay, Joe, did you want to deal with the issue about not going past Quay and moving the park and ride to start with?
Yeah, I didn't. So the moving the park and ride. The aim would be to do it as soon as we can. The difference between the works along Newmarket Road and the park and ride are Newmarket Road is largely on highway land. We can do it with relatively little environmental impact. It's relatively easy to get that approved and moving forward. The park and ride will be in the green belt. It will have an environmental impact that needs to be understood, and as such, it simply will take longer than the other works. So we want to bring it forward, but we have to be realistic that we will need to go through the proper processes and consider things like the environmental impacts before we try and do it. So it will just we wouldn't hold up the Newmarket Road works while we get to a point where we've got approval for the park and ride move. In terms of your other question, were you asking about what happens to Newmarket Road, the other side of the Quay interchange?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we've taken a sort of defined study area. We've got a certain amount of budget to play with, and we're really prioritising what goes on from the Quay interchange. You raised some valid points as to what might happen elsewhere, but we've got a sort of limited ability to deal with a wider area, and we're certainly not within this study looking at making highway improvements other than potentially from the Quay interchange to the park and ride site to ensure that people can get in an unimpeded way from Quay to the park and ride. Also potentially improvements to the Quay interchange, although we're aware that because of the possible relocation of the wastewater treatment plant, it may be that some improvements are picked up through that as well. That again is another of those moving pieces that we will find out a little bit more about. In terms of your concern about people who do need to get to Cambridge, I suppose the simple answer is if we do not do something, they won't be able to get into Cambridge anyway, because the congestion will continue to get worse, and we'll just get to a point where we've got gridlock anyway. So we are trying to get to a place where the opportunities are there for as many people as possible to use an alternative to the private car, releasing what road space there is for those who really do need to go in. It's likely there will be less, probably more expensive parking in the city centre. We're certainly not going to be improving road access to the city simply because there is nowhere for those people to go when they get there. So it's unlikely to get better, but I suppose what we're trying to do is to make it no worse for those people who are trying to go in by encouraging people to do alternatives, and particularly around walking and cycling when they can. It's not going to be a perfect solution because I think we're all aware that Cambridge is already very, very congested, and clearly we hope that the park and ride for a lot of people will be a good improvement, whether they take a bus into the city centre or indeed, as many people do, they then choose to consider walking or cycling to destinations, depending on what suits them.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
What about my cycle question?
Yeah, so Joe, so thanks, Joe. Grant, did you want to just pick up Councillor Daunton's question about the scope of the greenways in the east?
Yeah, I mean, Claire, this point has come up across the greenways, to be honest, on whether the greenways north, south, east and west, that there's a real desire for the villages outside of the scope of the greenways to be connected. And I'd like to think as the greenways become more and more popular, there then becomes a bit of pressure to, secure funds further down the line to extend the greenways further out.
Okay, might I just come back very quickly? I'm not giving up on that because we are the East and it is Eastern access. So maybe when you're designing the greenways, you can design in possible routes. And if there's little bits of money left over, you can think about connecting those places. And actually the connections are not that difficult and wouldn't be that so much more expensive with some creativity and some forward thinking. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your points, Councillor Daunton. The next person who's got their hand up is John Trapp. So if we could unmute John and you could ask your question, John.
Thank you very much. Like Claire, I have a number of to ask. I'm a district councillor for East Cambs, Swaffhams, or Swaffham Bullbeck. So one thing is, how much, there's a number of questions. How much engagement with ECDC have you had about the traffic going into, because most of the traffic that is going to Quay roundabout is actually from ECDC. So that's one question. I'm really pleased with the idea of bus franchising to help the north of the A14, because the villages along the north of the A14, just north of the A14, are actually probably the largest group of bus users there are, and actually having good bus services, which we had until I think the bus bus route to Cottenham came in, was very good. So that's the other one. Now, the other point I've got about is that the centre is not the main aim of most people travelling to Cambridge. There's about four or five distinct employment centres in Cambridge, such as Addenbrooke's, such as the Science Park, so actually being able to travel into the centre of Cambridge is not always what one wants, because actually after that, one has to go and travel somewhere else outside of Cambridge, outside of the centre. I'm also interested in the greenways. I think it's fantastic. I mean, I think we've had the Quay to Load greenway or busway, cycleway is terrific. But all the greenways seem to be radiating from the centre of Cambridge, whereas actually what one wants, particularly something like Bottisham Village College, is connection from Load and Swaffham Bullbeck to Bottisham itself. So there's a lot of things there that one actually needs, which are not just radiating from Cambridge, but are elsewhere.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Trapp. So, Joe, did you want to pick up the question about engagement with East Cambs District Council and bus franchising?
I mean, GCP largely works with the City Council and South Cambs. We've had some discussions with East Cambs and with Suffolk, but I'd say the focus has been on the area which we have a remit to work within. Our remit does not include East Cambridge, and we've had a few discussions with parishes outside, including Swaffhams. I think you've probably participated in those discussions. But it is, and this is not something. I believe it was something that was actually a decision taken partly by East Cambs at the time. But the city deal was signed between government, the county, South Cambridgeshire, and the City Council. So that is a sort of boundary condition for what we are now doing. We certainly will be considering how people can travel in from elsewhere, and that's one of the reasons for having Park and Ride. But I think the potential of bus franchising is really the thing that creates more opportunity to pick up the issue of rural bus services. That's rural bus services in East Cambridgeshire are outside our remit, and so they really do need to be picked up through the powers that are now vested in the mayor, and which we understand are something that he wants to pursue.
Okay, thanks. And Grant, did you just want to pick up the issue that Councillor raised about the greenways only being radial?
Yeah, I'll just pick up the point also that although we state the greenways are connected into the centre of Cambridge, as you get to the centre of Cambridge, you can then pick up links to go to Cambridge Biomedical Campus, to the Science Park. Yeah, and again, it's a perfectly valid point to make the link to all the greenways as a radial link. But again, that's, for another point in the future, once the greenways get more popular, there will be that demand for a radial link, as will be links to further villages further outlying.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you, Councillor Trump. So the next person who's got their hand up is Linda Worth. So if you want to unmute Linda, and we can ask your question.
Yeah.
We can hear you now, Linda.
You can hear me. Okay, great. Yes, thanks. Question for Grant. I noticed that you were saying that the greenways are going to potentially be delivered in blobs of quick wins. So we have already had at least one quick win in my area, which was the Sawston Greenway. Unfortunately, what happened as the result of that was we've got equestrian access from Stapleford partway to Sawston, and from partway to Sawston actually into Sawston. But the road crossing is not equestrian friendly. So the route is actually, the total route is unavailable to equestrians. Can I please have an undertaking that every section that you will do as a quick win will be ready for equestrian use at such time that it can be linked up? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very valid point, Linda. And we've got to make sure that the individual sort of elements of the greenway aren't just developed solely, and you end up with the problem that you've just sort of mentioned there. That we've got to make sure that, you know, if we do deliver a certain section within a greenway, that there are links at either end of that section until the other bits actually feed into it.
Okay.
I take it that's a yes.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Linda. So the next person with their hand up is Councillor Williams, John Williams. If we can unmute John Williams, and we can ask the question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, David. I did ask the question in chat, which the city planner conveniently sidestepped, and that is for the East Barnwell regeneration. Have you been consulting Fen Ditton Parish Council? Because whatever you do in East Barnwell is going to have a direct impact on Fen Ditton, which is literally just up the road, and its only route into the city is through East Barnwell. So can I be assured that, and this is your city colleague, I appreciate this isn't GCP, that Fen Ditton Parish Council will be fully consulted over what you intend to do in East Barnwell?
Rory, are you just able to come back
Yep.
to Councillor Williamson's point?
Perfectly happy. So I do apologise, Councillor. I was intending to answer the question sort of at this point. So obviously there was other questions being asked. So in terms of our interaction with Fen Ditton, I personally haven't had any interaction with Fen Ditton Parish Council, which is a fair point. During the consultation process, we were very much consulting the East Barnwell community. And obviously there is a linkage because they are so very close, I understand that. In terms of our future developments, I think it's a very valid point that you raise. Within the development of this master plan, obviously we've been looking at the specific challenges of East Barnwell residents and the East Barnwell community. And Fen Ditton has impacted on that in as much as there are people obviously who live there and have working relationships or obviously they travel to Abbey Ward and back again. So in terms of our consideration of transportation, which is mainly where it's been, to be honest with you, Councillor, it's been related to the ability to get from one location to the other. We have been in discussions with my colleagues who obviously working with highways, and our ability to impact the roads through the City Council's planning are quite limited. We have, however, had a number of people approach us with the desire to see a safer sort of cycle and similar alternate routes to and from Fen Ditton. And that's something which is built into the final master plan. So we have considered that aspect of it. I suppose in terms of how Fen Ditton Parish Council would want to interact with the council in the city going forward, I think we absolutely would like to hear feedback on the master plan when it comes out, but also on the interim document which was published last year, which I'm perfectly happy to circulate to you after this meeting if you wish.
Okay.
That will impact on our planning going forward.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, can I ask that you also circulate that to Fen Ditton Parish Council?
Certainly.
I mean, just to give you an example, they are literally a stone throw away from the City 3 bus route, but they themselves have a really inferior 2-day, 2 times a day bus service into Cambridge. And they literally are on the edge of Cambridge city boundary. And little things like that. I mean, it's the Greenway, fantastic down Ditton Lane, and that's greatly improved access to Fen Ditton Primary School for people who live in the city, as well as people in Fen Ditton to get into the city. But there are other things, as I say, like public transport connections, which at the moment are absolutely abysmal. And it's literally the boundary of the city and South Cambs that determines whether you have a decent 20-minute bus service or one that's twice a day. And I hope that, we look at that as well.
Okay, thanks for your points, Councillor Williams. So the next person, Charles Jones, you've got your hands up. So if we can unmute Charles Jones, and then I'll start to read through the chat questions after we've taken Charles. You should be able to speak now, Charles. I'm afraid I can't hear you, Charles.
There is a question in the chat, David, so maybe we can refer to that.
Okay, fine. Let me have a look down. Sorry, Charles, I don't think your mic is working properly. So shall I just read out your question, which I think is,
no.
Do you think the commercial facilities west of the railway already serve East Barnwell within 15 minutes? They seem a bit underweight as a centre, since they are outside the project area. So I think that's another question for you, Rory. If you could briefly answer that, because...
Yes, I beg your pardon. Yeah. So fundamentally, this is a question about placemaking. We have been looking, as I say, within our study area at the Barnwell area, which has a very strong sense of community identity, and that's both historically and today. And when we have been considering the future of the area, we've been considering how to link the whole area together and maintain that identity going forward. And within East Barnwell, there is some quite severely peripheral areas which are a very long way from those commercial facilities to the west of it. And people often have to use cars or they rely on public transport, which obviously with the challenges we've already discussed today. So the aim has been to focus on developing a very strong sense of place and community within East Barnwell. And it's not that people won't continue to use those, and we can't factor them in, but there's a very specific reason why we focused on that area as a distinct part of the city. And the railway line does form a bit of a barrier to access as it currently stands. So that will continue to be the case, we think. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, let's start. I'm going to start to run down some of the questions in the chat now. So just one quick question here, Joe, is are the Grant, are the greenways responsibility of GCP or the CA? There are GCP projects, aren't they?
Yeah.
Okay. Just following on from Councillor Dalton's questions, should you not coordinate any bus franchise improvements so that public transport improvement coincide with further restrictions on driving into the city and don't trail behind them? Joe, I don't know if that's maybe more of a statement than a question, but
yeah, I mean, clearly that would be optimal. I think we need to make progress on these issues. There's a very clear requirements to do so from the consultation, and we hope that we'll be working closely with the Combined Authority as things move forward.
Thanks very much. The next question is for you, Grant, is what budget provision is there going to be made to maintain the greenways?
There's discussions being undertaken at the County Council about a policy with regards to commuted sums at the moment. So it's a case of just watch this space. Okay,
so and just the follow-up question is there any provision that you're making with the greenways for those not able to walk or cycle? I think they're primarily focused on people improving walking and cycling, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, and questions as well.
Yeah. Okay. There's a question here which I think is referring to one of the maps, Joe, which is I saw a brown dotted line running east-west across Colden's Common to mid-Barnwell Drive, where it's 40 miles per hour. Are you planning a new crossing on Barnwell Drive?
Yes, potentially. Obviously, there is a range of potential improved access. If the Marshall site moves forwards, there will be a need for a whole sort of network of connectivity. But clearly, if we did have a new, and just to be really clear, it's a walking and cycling route to give better access onto the Chisholm Trail. It's no more than that. But clearly, you'd need to have safe facilities on Barnwell Drive as well.
Okay, thanks. Grant, the next one's for you, which is connecting Horningsea and Waterbeach greenways together would be sensible, as it's a difficult route which is currently quite dangerous. And I have to say, we had this question on Tuesday night from the Northern people asking for the connection the other way from Waterbeach. So I'll be interested if your answer is the same as Simon's on Tuesdays.
Yeah, I mean, that's again a very valid point, and I think we sort of touched on that earlier about the radial route between the greenways. And again, that's something that could come out of all this. It'd certainly be a fantastic idea.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly what we said on Tuesday. So we were on message, both sides. Another question, which is, does the Swaffham, Quay, Fendit and Greenway still have input for developments by Sostrans and DTP? I don't know who DTP is.
I'm assuming that may well mean the greenways will be where possible in line with LTM 120.
Yeah.
And I believe members of Sustrans and DFT fed into that, well, it was a DFT document. So yes.
Okay, fine. Just a comment here, which is very disappointing. The comment basically East Cambs is not important as part of GCP. It's only Cambridge City and South Cambs. I'm not sure that's what, Joe, you said or you meant. I think you were clarifying that the Greater Cambridge Partnership deal is a deal signed between Cambridge City and South Cambs district and the county of that area. It's a partnership and it has a defined geographical area. We have a board which makes decisions on that has one representative from South Cambs, one representative from the city, and one from the county. We also have a business representative and someone from the university. So that's our remit, and that's who makes the decisions. I think that's the point you were trying to make, wasn't it, Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where Swaffham, Quay, Fendit and Greenway crosses Ditton Lane, will the lights be moved as part of the ongoing works? I think that's quite a specific question, Grant, about the lights on Ditton Lane.
Yeah, not quite in a position to answer that yet. That's where the kind of finer detail, when we get involved with the relevant consultant, that'll be fleshed out then.
That's good. Okay, just a core request here for you, Rory, that Horningsea residents would, the Horningsea be treated the same as Fenditton. So could Horningsea Parish Council be similarly consulted in the same way that you're planning to reach out to Fenditton?
Yes, I'm happy to add that.
That's fine. Yeah, okay, fine. So let's go back. Could we, John, I know you've got your hand up again. You've already had one go. So I'm going to go to Alan Sharp next because he hasn't had time to ask a question. So Alistair, could we just unmute Alan so he could ask the question? Okay. Alan, we should be able to hear you now.
Yeah, I wanted to come back. I was the person who made the comment about East Cambs not being important. I'm a county councillor for the Wood Ditton division, which includes all the villages south of Newmarket and Bottisham and Lode, and I'm also chairman of East Cambridgeshire District Council as well. And a lot of the decisions that are being made are affecting my residents on the east side, and we don't seem to. Maybe I took it wrong from the comments made, but it was. I understand the way that the GCP was set up, but it is frustrating that we seem to have very little input, but it probably affects us more than maybe some of the Cambridge City residents.
I think so, David. It's worth saying. So, we in the previous consultation, we as I alluded to, we have had input from a number of members and residents from East Cambridgeshire and also from Suffolk. So in the consultation process, we've done that, and it's fair to say a number of different organisations, both within and without our area, asked for meetings. And at that point and in the future, we've always been very happy to have those meetings. The issues in terms of the priority for investment, our remit for investment is focused on the defined GCP area, and that is our remit. We don't have jurisdiction over yourselves within East Cambridgeshire. The historical reasons for that are before my time, but we certainly have had and will, I hope, continue to have dialogue with your residents in terms of understanding the potential impacts.
Yeah, I could just back that up, Councillor Sharp. So in terms of the sort of consultation, I think it was prior to you coming on to the County Council, when we did early things, we did reach out to all the East Cambs district councillors. Were invited to the relevant councillor briefings, as were West Suffolk district councillors, parish councils in East Cambridgeshire, all the way along like Burwell, etc., all the way out, were all sent copies of the consultation document, and we particularly targeted them in terms of outreach to get them engaged in the process. We targeted schools within East Cambridgeshire as well, so that they could to promote the consultations and through their parent mail. So we are working hard to recognise that while the funding and the remit is within Cambridge City and South Cambs, there is this wider area of interest, and we see that continuing as this process goes forward. Okay. So I think thanks very much there, Councillor Sharp. I've got Martin Tugwell. You've got your hand up, so if we unmute Martin and Martin, you should be able to speak now.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So it's a question really for Joe. I just wanted to check my understanding of what I thought I heard. So I got the sense from what Joe was saying, you see the heavy rail option as kind of medium to longer term, and I'm just wondering whether and welcome the commitment to keep working with both East West Rail Consortium. My day job, I'm the program director for England's Economic Partner, and we provide support for the East West Rail Consortium. And so the commitment to working with the consortium, and indeed hopefully with the STB, is appreciated. I just wonder though whether we're missing a trick, because it seems to me that there may be an opportunity to accelerate some of this thinking, particularly around the heavy rail, particularly given that we know, or the kind of the work that's starting to emerge from the business case for the eastern section would perhaps tend to support some of those cross-city movements, which I've heard a number of contributors talk about, rather than going into the centre. It's actually back through to the biomedical campus, etc. And so I'm just thinking that, there may be opportunities, just question whether there may be opportunities to accelerate these things, perhaps if we start joining some of this thinking up. And I'm thinking there also that if we can accelerate some of this and have the step change, then clearly public transport, particularly heavy rail, is a far less carbon intensive solution. And given the importance, the emphasis on achieving net zero carbon at the earliest opportunity, I'm just kind of challenging us. I think we should just challenge ourselves, Joe, and we kind of think sometimes some of the active travel, easy to do, short-term rail, long-term, harder to do. And I think we should just perhaps challenge some of our thinking perhaps sometimes.
I think we would be very positive about and receptive to the opportunity to bring the rail investment forward. A little bit like the East Cambridgeshire discussion, what happens between Cambridge and Newmarket is outside our sort of direct control. So we need to be realistic that we will work with and be supportive of doing that, but it's not something that GCP can unilaterally decide to advance. So fabulous. If other stakeholders want to move things forward more quickly, we'd be receptive. Certainly very positive about the fact that heavy rail can be achieving net zero. It probably needs to be electrified if it's going to be, and that in itself can be a more challenging thing in terms of timescales. So I think we just need to be realistic that we're looking potentially at new stations, twin tracking, electrification, all fabulous things that we'd be keen to work with and be supportive of. But I know these things can take longer than would be desirable. but you know, let's do what we can to bring them forward.
I suppose all I'm just asking, Joe, and I hear what you say, and I guess that's quite often the experience. I just think we owe it to ourselves and the residents to challenge that. So quite often we allow these things to happen because we allow them to happen. We're just doing as a response to the consultation on the current East West Rail consultation, which I know is to the affects the west of Cambridge, but a key point being made there, and indeed more recent designs are like this. It doesn't have to be environmentally destructive, or there's plenty of ways in which we can do these things faster and quicker if we choose to do it. That's all I would just say. Don't let's say that electrification of railways is difficult and takes a long time. If we say it will happen. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We can make things happen. Look at what's been happening in restoring your railways in Oakhampton, between Oakhampton and Exeter. Decision by the Secretary of State very quickly. It's going to be open by Christmas. We can do these things faster if we work together and we challenge received wisdom. That's all the point I'm making.
Okay, Martin. I think we're welcome to. We're keen to work with you on developing these opportunities. But your point's been well made, and thanks very much. I don't have anyone else with their hand up. Just if you have another question, please do now. And just while I'm talking, if you have a question, please do type away. Otherwise, I think that I believe we've answered all the questions that we came with people with their hands up and people who've written in the chat function. I can't see any more. At this point, sometimes someone's furiously typing away with a last moment question. Okay, maybe not today. So thank you very much. I think that's been a very productive session. As I said, the papers were all published last Friday in terms of the Eastern Access. That will go forward to the Joint Assembly next Thursday, the 10th. Is that right, Joe?
Sorry, the meeting is Thursday the 10th.
Yeah,
yes.
Thursday the 10th, where the papers are considered, and the final decision will be made when our executive committee meets.
Well, not the final decision. So the next round of decision making will be July the 1st.
Right. I was going, the final decision making bit of this journey is the executive board sorry, we're saying the same thing from these different ends, but we will go to the 1st of July meeting, and then we will then consider the way forward on the project as Joe's outlined in the presentation earlier. There will be further rounds of consultation before we do anything, even on the short-term stuff. There will be full public engagement. I think that's another point worth making. But on the basis, John, you've got your hand up, so I'm happy to take one final question from you, as long as it's sort of short and to the point.
Yes, very, very short. Will you send us a link to this presentation?
Yes, we're happy to do that.
To all the participants, please.
Well, we will put it on our website, and
but we shall know what the links are. Thank you.
Yes, I'll send you the link, John.
Many thanks.
Thank you.
Chair.
Okay, so we will put the link to this up on our website, and it also will sit on our YouTube channel, so you can review it at your leisure. And also we will put the presentations up on the website so that you'll be able to download them and have a review of them. But on that point, I think we will close the meeting. Thank you very much for your participation.